What's going on, everybody? Jacob here. Welcome back to Robski Football. This time, obviously, bringing you another preview and predict video for Game Week 37 of the Premier League. If you are new around here, by the way, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment, especially, obviously, given the next two match weeks ahead of us, the final two match weeks. What do you see happening? Obviously, headlines to be written still either end of the table for the title, the Champions League race, the European race, and obviously the relegation battle. But before we head into match week 37, let's do a quick recap of a few of the fixtures I predicted last weekend. Brighton Wolves, I did predict 3-0, and they did duly deliver on that one. Fulham, Bournemouth, I did predict 2-1 for a Bournemouth team to win. That obviously looking to try and secure European qualification. I believe for the first time in their history, I am willing to be corrected on that one, but they did go away with a 1-0 win away at Fulham. City obviously did get their win 3-0 against Brentford, as I did predict 3-1. And then what else do we have? Obviously West Ham, Arsenal. West Ham, a little bit unlucky. I don't want to cause a few arguments here, but they were unlucky with the decisions that happened. I did predict a 2-1 Arsenal win. They did get 3 points, albeit a 1-0 victory. And obviously Spurs versus Leeds. Spurs at the moment, I think they look a lot better and a lot more of a collective unit under De Zerbi. Obviously didn't do enough to get the victory against Leeds. However, Leeds, on the other hand, are now 8 points clear of West Ham in 18th, and they are safe and sound for next season. And a great job by Daniel Farke and the rest of the guys up there. But I did predict a 3-2 win for Spurs, and obviously it ended up as a 1-1 draw in that one. Now, into Game Week 37. So, Game Week 37, up first on the menu on Friday evening is Aston Villa versus Liverpool. Now, of course, both teams sitting next to each other in 4th and 5th, and they actually both did draw their last game. Burnley, obviously, at Villa, drew 2-2, and Liverpool against Chelsea drew 1-1. The last 5 games between these two has ended up with both teams scoring, and I do think the same is going to be said for this game as well. I think neither team will want to lose this one. I think both teams may want to draw this one just to kind of keep ahead of each other. But at the same time, it's football, it's a competitive game, and I do think there's goals, but I do think it'll be a 2-2 draw for this game, and that's what I'm going to slide in right here on the prediction website. And then, let's go into United Forest. United Forest, it's what I expected last week from Man United. It was a drab performance from a few individuals, especially. Sunderland did well in parts, but I think it was a fair result. Was the 0-0 draw. Forest, on the other hand, they've got a heap more to lose than Man United at this time. They're still not safe in this relegation battle, and obviously being knocked out of the Europa League, it's what they've got to focus on now. And obviously with Morgan Gibbs-White, especially given his form of recent times with that nasty head injury, if he'll be back, that will be obviously a big boost for them. I do have Forest winning this one, though. I think Man United might put in one of those performances that, their heads are already on the beach, the job has already been done. Michael Carrick seems, or at least he's a 99% certain to get the job as the manager for next season. So maybe, not that he will obviously be wanting the guys to rest on their laurels, but I think Forest have more to lose, and they will put in a performance that is deserved of that as well. On to Brentford versus Crystal Palace. Now, Brentford versus Crystal Palace is obviously an important one, more so for Brentford. Both in terms of obviously losing to City 3-0, but they themselves have a battle to try and secure Europa League football, or even Europa Conference League football for next season. Both teams actually did lose 3-0 in their last game against Man City, Crystal Palace in that game more recently on Monday were very, very poor. They did create a few chances, but overall it wasn't something that we took much notice of in terms of any quality going forward, and they were poor in large parts of that game. That being said, I think Brentford at home especially under Keith Andrews, but also under Thomas Frank in the last few seasons before. They've always been very good at home, and I think that's going to be the similar headline in this one, and that's why I'm going to go for a 3-1 win to Brentford. I just think Brentford going forward with not even just Igor Thiago, who looks like he's gone off the boil of the last few games, but Damsgaard, Keane Lewis Potter, those are the guys that I like to watch indeed, and yeah, I'm looking forward to that one as well. Everton versus Sunderland. Now, Everton versus Sunderland is one of those games, again, where Sunderland don't have anything really to pay for. Everton look like they're on kind of the periphery of getting Europa League football, or European football, I should say, for next season. That being said, David Moyes has done a fantastic job with Everton this season, especially with, the pressure of going into a new stadium. We remember how that kind of treated for West Ham, everything that went around with that stadium, and obviously it was a kind of a different situation, but you never know how that's going to translate from going from an English football heritage site, let's say in Everton and the Goodison Park, over to a brand new Hill Dickinson stadium, which they've definitely given their fans already some days to remember in that stadium. And again, Sunderland don't have much to play for. Everton are 4 points off Europe. It doesn't look likely, but I'm sure they'll be doing everything they can to give them their best chance in qualification, and that's why I'm going to go for a 2-1 win here. I think Everton look very good, especially going forward. Obviously, they've been without Jack Grealish of late, but Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, who I think should never have gone to Chelsea, but if he went to another club where maybe let's say a Fulham or even a Tottenham of sorts, so those kinds of teams where he would get duly, his playing time that's needed, you will see a good player shine through. Leeds versus Brighton. Now, Leeds are obviously safe now. They're 8 points clear of the relegation zone after that point against Spurs. Brighton, on the other hand, they are in 7th, but they are in a battle of the South Coast for European football for next season. Out of their last 10, they've only lost 2, which I believe after they got dumped out of the FA Cup, they've gone on a remarkable run under Fabian Hürzeler, and they've done remarkably well as well. With this game, Elland Road, as I always say, is a very, very tough place to go, no matter who you are. Brighton do have the minerals, they do have the talent and the players to get a result away to a team and in a stadium like Elland Road. And I think Brighton, they have more to play for, but I'm sure Daniel Farke will set up his team like he always does to be competitive. However, I do think Brighton may have just a little bit more on the day to get the 3 points and take them back to the South Coast and to put them into good standing going into the final game of the season. Wolves versus Fulham. Wolves versus Fulham. Obviously, Wolves now, we've kind of disregarded Wolves, it's sad to say, over the last few weeks since their relegation was confirmed, losing 3-0 to Brighton last time out. Fulham, on the other hand, they did lose 1-0 at home to Bournemouth. Bournemouth, again, like I've just mentioned with Brighton, they're in against them for European contention. Joachim Andersen, who's obviously an important player at the back for Fulham, did get a red card and is now suspended. And the last game, Fulham did win 3-0 at home when Wolves visited them. That being said, again, I don't see anything from Fulham in terms of firepower, from Wolves in terms of firepower, in terms of anything that will cause danger for Fulham, despite Joachim Andersen not being there. Fulham, on the other hand, Marco Silva, is he going to be staying long term? Is he going to be moving after the summer? Who knows? But I'm sure, as any manager would, he would want to sign off in the right fashion. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 win to Fulham in this one. Newcastle versus West Ham. Now, of course, one of probably the most important games of this weekend. West Ham, unlucky, to say the least. They're very unlucky against Arsenal. They did cause Arsenal a lot of problems. The crowd did get behind them. Obviously, this time around, they're away at St James's Park. That, again, such as in Elland Road, is always hard to go to and get points from. But Newcastle have been just kind of stagnant. They've been a little bit up, they've been a little bit down, but that's kind of been the story of their season so far. Rumours of Anthony Gordon agreeing terms with Bayern Munich over this past week has been circulating, and obviously I'm sure has caused a bit of unrest around the club in the dressing room, and obviously they've got a few other notable players that might be heading out of the exit door of St James's Park in the next few months. This being said, I do think it's going to be a game where it's going to be competitive. Of course, West Ham have got a bit more to lose. Apologies, that is my dog Luna. But Newcastle do have a bit have less to lose than West Ham, and I do think West Ham, given what I saw against what they did against Arsenal, but also kind of collectively over the course of their season, especially in the second half of the season, they've definitely looked a lot more pragmatic. Players like Mateus Fernandes, who I hope Man United are looking at for the summer transfer window. Jared Bowen, of course, goes without saying. Castellanos always is a threat, especially with that header in the first half against Arsenal, and that challenged Raya. So yeah, they've got the talent there, and they just need to pull through. However, I think Newcastle might stand in the way of this one. I do think West Ham obviously will go all out to win, but I can't see them getting the 3 points against this Newcastle side, who it's hard to see what you're going to get from Newcastle this season. And this one has kind of clouded my judgment, but I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw for that game. Arsenal versus Burnley. Now, obviously, Arsenal versus Burnley. I think purely from the fact that Arsenal, it looks like they've got one hand on the title. We won't know, I think, until the final game of the season what happens in that regard. But that being said, the one thing that doesn't separate Man City or Arsenal at this time is goal difference, and goal difference is going to be important against a Burnley team who have obviously shipped a heap of goals, across the course of the season. Arsenal have obviously players like Bukayo Saka coming back into the kind of the momentum that we've seen of him especially over the last 2 or 3 seasons. And needless to say, I think Arsenal will get the goals in this game, and I am going to go for a 4-0 win for Arsenal, I should say, and for Mikel Arteta to try and grasp that first Premier League title in 22 years, I will say, for Arsenal. Bournemouth versus City. Now, obviously, the next 2 fixtures, City and Chelsea, are both in the FA Cup final at the weekend, so these games are being played on the Tuesday. Man City away to Bournemouth is going to be a very tough one. Europa League is 2 points off Bournemouth are 2 points ahead of Brighton for Europa League contention at the moment, but they're also 4 points behind Villa in the Champions League spots, which is one to keep an eye on, albeit it might not happen. At least it's less likely. It is a tough place to go. I think Bournemouth, Iraola, he looks like he's heading out. Similar with Marco Silva, will he want to just make sure that Bournemouth are in the best position possible going into next season? With how it's set up in a title charge for Man City, I'm going to go on a whim here and say that this is where it becomes all unravelled. I think it's going to be a similar game to the Everton game for City, full of action, end to end. Bournemouth don't want to lose. Man City have it all to win, and they need to win. And I do think Bournemouth will put up a fight. I think defensively they looked pretty strong overall over the course of the season, and I am going to go for a Bournemouth 2, Man City 2 as a result. Then finally, Chelsea versus Spurs. Now, Chelsea, I think this London rivalry, it goes without saying that I'm sure the Chelsea fans and Chelsea players will want to do a number on Spurs. That being said, like I said previously earlier in the video, De Zerbi and Spurs as a whole, they've looked a lot more collective and a lot more solid at the back and been more pragmatic and progressive with the ball going forward. Chelsea, though, did look good against Liverpool, albeit it wasn't a stunning match to say the least. Obviously, Callum McFarlane at the helm at this time as the interim boss. But yeah, I just don't see a world where Spurs go to Stamford Bridge and get a result in terms of a win. I think Chelsea will make it very hard for them. I think the crowd will be up for this game. The home crowd will be up for this game, but it's going to be one hell of a contest, and this is one I've got earmarked as one I'm definitely going to watch next week. So that being said, I think Chelsea might have just a little bit more than Spurs on the day. I'm going to go for a 2-1 victory, and obviously that causes a few issues for Spurs. If West Ham do get a draw, or even if they do get a win, that flips things completely, and that sets us up for an enticing, exciting last day of the season. So I'm going to hit submit here, get those in. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. All the support, all the views, whatever it is. I don't, this is at the end of the day a hobby for me, and I just love bringing content, sharing my thoughts, all of that good stuff. And I will be back next time with a few videos of my own. We'll go into obviously the final day of the season and the prediction and the previews for that one, but then also teeing up a World Cup which is only less than a month away, and that one I cannot wait for. So I will see you guys soon.